Lauren Dumalo was last seen on June 19, 2020, at her apartment in the 4900 block of Coronado Parkway in Cape Coral, Florida, a day that began like many others, but ended in an unsettling mystery that continues to haunt her loved ones. That morning, Lauren's boyfriend, Gabriel Pena, saw her at their residence before leaving for work at approximately 6 a.m. sometime between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock a.m. Lauren, or someone using her phone, made a Facebook video call to Pena. He didn't answer, and this call is the last known sign of her. By the time Gabriel returned home later that day, Lauren was gone. What made Lauren's disappearance even more puzzling was the discovery of her purse at Four Freedoms Park in the 4800 block of Tarpon Court later that same day. Lauren was known to visit the park often to meditate. The park was only a 6-minute walk from her apartment, a distance she could easily manage since she didn't own a car or have a driver's license. Despite its proximity, she never returned home, leaving behind her cellular phone and all her personal belongings at the apartment. Friends and family grew increasingly alarmed as hours turned into days with no contact from her. The mystery deepened further on July 2nd, when Lauren's shirt was discovered by the waterline at Four Freedoms Park, a location that had been searched multiple times prior to that date. The fact that the shirt hadn't been seen earlier led investigators to consider the possibility that it had been planted there after the initial searches. This raised more questions than answers and fueled speculation about foul play. Lauren's disappearance was completely out of character, adding to the fears of her family and friends. She was a loving mother to her young daughter, who was in the custody of Lauren's mother at the time. Lauren's life appeared to be moving forward in a positive direction. She had recently filled out multiple job applications and had paid her rent in full, actions inconsistent with someone planning to leave her life behind. Her family insists she wouldn't have vanished voluntarily, especially without making provisions for her daughter. Lauren's case is being treated as that of an endangered missing person. Authorities, friends, and family members have worked tirelessly to uncover what happened to her, but answers have been elusive. Despite searches, public appeals for information, and growing media attention, no significant leads have emerged. As days turned into months, the hope of finding Lauren alive began to dim, but her family has remained steadfast in their pursuit of the truth. They continue to advocate for her, refusing to let her case be forgotten. Lauren's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the many unanswered questions that remain in the lives of families of missing persons. Her disappearance has left a void in the lives of those who loved her, particularly her daughter, who continues to grow up without her mother. Lauren Dumalo's case remains unsolved. Angela Dufrain's disappearance is a tragic and haunting case marked by contradictions, a history of abuse, and a lack of justice. Angela lived in Miami, Florida, with her twin brother, her 2-year-old sister, their mother, Marjorie Dufrain, and Marjorie's boyfriend. Her 2 older siblings, age 4 and 10, lived with their father, Marjorie's estranged husband, Louis Dufrain, but would visit their mother on weekends. Although Louis was legally considered the twins' father because he was married to Marjorie when they were born, Marjorie claimed their biological father was a former boyfriend, Henry Matthew. The Florida Department of Children and Families had been involved with Marjorie's family since 2011 due to repeated allegations of abuse and neglect. This included a disturbing incident where Marjorie hit one of her sons in the face with a belt, causing injuries severe enough to require surgery. Despite this history, Angela's eventual disappearance went unnoticed for an extended period, and the system meant to protect her failed to intervene in time. In late 2014, Angela's life took a tragic turn. Around October or November, Marjorie stopped bringing Angela to daycare, claiming the child was staying with her grandmother. Louis Dufrain, who had supervised visits with his children through DCF, also noticed Angela's absence starting in early 2015. Marjorie consistently brought only Angela's twin to these visits, offering no explanation for Angela's whereabouts. The last confirmed sighting of Angela occurred in December 2014, when she received vaccinations during a doctor's visit. Despite numerous interactions between DCF workers and the family, Angela was never seen again. In July 2016, nearly 2 years after Angela was last seen, her disappearance was finally reported. Concerns about the family escalated when allegations of sexual abuse against Marjorie's boyfriend surfaced, alongside reports of the family living in squalor. A DCF investigator discovered that Marjorie's landlord had no knowledge of Angela's existence and believed she had only 4 children, not 5. When questioned, Marjorie initially denied Angela's existence, but when presented with Angela's birth certificate, she claimed Angela was with her biological father, Henry Matthew. This story quickly unraveled as Marjorie provided incorrect contact information for Matthew and pretended to call him, while leading the investigator on a futile search. Marjorie's explanations about Angela's fate grew increasingly inconsistent and alarming. She first claimed that Angela had been with Matthew's mother, a story that was proven false. Then, she told investigators that Angela had died in March 2016 after falling during an argument with her boyfriend, who allegedly disposed of her body, something her boyfriend denied. Marjorie later claimed Angela had fallen out of her arms, began coughing up blood, and died. According to this version of events, Marjorie placed Angela's body in a garbage bag and discarded it in a McDonald's dumpster. In a court appearance in July 2016, when pressed by a judge about Angela's whereabouts, Marjorie stated bluntly, "She is dead. She is no longer with us." Despite this admission, no charges have been filed against Marjorie or anyone else due to the lack of evidence. Investigators believe Angela is deceased, but without her remains or eyewitness testimony, the case remains unsolved. Angela's story highlights systemic failures in protecting vulnerable children. Her disappearance and presumed death went unnoticed for far too long, and the conflicting accounts surrounding her fate have left investigators grappling for answers. The mysterious disappearance of Angela Delauder, her live-in boyfriend Ivan Gutierrez, her mother Gertrude Minasher, and Miniature's boyfriend Charles Gibson remains one of Florida's most puzzling cases. The 4 were last seen on March 7, 1981, in Hallandale, Florida, where they had gathered for a dinner engagement. Delauder and Gutierrez lived together in the 200 block of Southeast 9th Court in Hallandale, while Minasher resided in the 500 block of Northwest 214th Street in Miami. Gibson lived in an apartment in the 8900 block of Northeast 4th Avenue in Miami Shores. Just days before their disappearance, Minasher had a phone conversation with her other daughter, Robin Patton, on March 4th. During this call, Minasher mentioned plans to leave and promised to send plane tickets and directions. The following day, Patton received letters from both her mother and sister in the same envelope, along with $100. These messages would be the last communication Patton would ever receive from them. On March 14th, a week after the group vanished, Gibson's Cadillac was discovered abandoned in the parking lot of Miami International Airport. Authorities located the vehicle based on information from a police informant. This clue added a layer of intrigue to the case, as Gibson, a man with a criminal past, had cleared out his apartment prior to his disappearance. Known for his connections to drug gangs and a history of working as an enforcer, Gibson was on lifetime parole for robbery at the time he went missing. His ties to the criminal underworld raised suspicions about the group's fate. Shortly after the disappearances, neighbors at Miniature's apartment complex reported seeing a woman and 2 men arrive with a U-Haul truck. The trio emptied Miniature's apartment and informed a neighbor that the residents had been killed on the expressway in northern Florida. The neighbor assumed this meant they had died in a car accident, but no evidence was ever found to support this claim. The 4 individuals had long been entangled in the drug world, a lifestyle that may have played a significant role in their disappearance. Patton, who had managed to leave that life behind, had repeatedly urged her mother and sister to do the same. In 1981, warrants had been issued for Gibson and Miniature's arrest for their involvement in aiding a prison escapee, Harvey Michael McElroy. McElroy, also a drug enforcer, had been found murdered in January 1981. His body, shot, burned, and dumped on a trash heap, pointed to a violent end connected to the drug trade. Authorities suspected Gibson and Menasher may have been involved in disposing of McElroy's body and wanted to question them about the murder. Police warned DeLauder that her mother, Menasher, could be in danger due to her presumed knowledge of McElroy's death. Investigators theorized that Menasher and Gibson were likely killed because of what they knew, with DeLauder and Gutierrez becoming innocent victims of circumstance. Another possibility under consideration is that the group fled to avoid retribution, possibly relocating to Germany or Colombia. However, Patton has denied any knowledge of their whereabouts, despite speculation that she might have information. The case remains shrouded in mystery, with no concrete evidence emerging about what happened to DeLauder, Menasher, Gibson, and Gutierrez after March 1981. No signs of their whereabouts or any remains have been found in over 4 decades. Trenton Ducket's disappearance on August 27, 2006, remains one of Florida's most perplexing unsolved cases, steeped in family conflict, legal battles, and tragic consequences. The 2-year-old boy was last seen at the Windermere Apartments in Leesburg, Florida, where he lived with his mother, Melinda M. Ducket. According to Melinda, she put Trenton to bed at approximately 7 p.m. that evening. When she checked on him 2 hours later, he was gone. The window screen in his bedroom had been slit, leading authorities to speculate that an abductor may have entered through the window and taken the child. Initially, the case was treated as an abduction, with authorities appealing to the public for help in finding Trenton. However, as the investigation unfolded, law enforcement shifted their focus to Trenton's parents, Melinda and Joshua Ducket, as potential focal points in the case. The couple, who had begun dating in high school, were in the midst of a bitter divorce and custody battle. Their relationship was marked by allegations of domestic violence and accusations of abuse involving Trenton, both before and after their brief marriage in 2005. Trenton had spent significant time in the care of Melinda's grandparents and in foster homes due to the contentious nature of his home life. On July 2006, Melinda obtained a temporary restraining order against Joshua, accusing him of threatening her life and Trenton's. Joshua denied the allegations and cooperated fully with the investigation, passing a polygraph test. Meanwhile, suspicions about Melinda began to mount. Melinda refused to take a polygraph test and failed a voice stress analysis. Investigators discovered discarded photographs, sonogram images, and some of Trenton's toys in a trash bin at her apartment shortly after she reported him missing. The presence of these items in the garbage, combined with inconsistencies in her story, made police increasingly suspicious. Melinda claimed she had taken Trenton and a shotgun to a shooting range in Ocala National Forest on the day of his disappearance, but got lost and drove around Central Florida for 8 hours. Witnesses, however, reported seeing her in Leesburg during that time. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered more troubling details. No one other than Melinda had seen Trenton since the day before his reported disappearance. Melinda's claims about being lost and driving aimlessly were not corroborated, and her timeline raised significant doubts. Then, on September 8, 2006, 13 days after Trenton went missing, Melinda took her own life at her grandparents' home in Lady Lake, Florida. She left behind 2 suicide notes, one addressed to the public, expressing love for her son and despair over the scrutiny she faced, and another addressed to her family. Neither note offered any clues about Trenton's fate. Melinda's death further complicated the investigation. Her family cited the stress of her son's disappearance and the intense media coverage, particularly an aggressive interview with television host Nancy Grace, as contributing factors in her suicide. Following her death, Melinda's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Grace and CNN, her network. The case was settled out of court in 2010, with CNN agreeing to establish a $200,000 trust fund to aid in the search for Trenton. On September 21, 2006, 2 weeks after Melinda's death, police named her as the prime and only suspect in Trenton's disappearance. However, they clarified that they did not necessarily believe she had harmed him. Investigators explored numerous theories, including the possibility that Melinda had sent Trenton to her native South Korea, but found no evidence to support this. By 2007, authorities had ruled out stranger abduction and the idea that Melinda had given Trenton to someone to hide him from Joshua. Despite the passage of time, law enforcement remains hopeful that Trenton is alive. Andrea Durham was last seen on February 1, 1990, at her family's apartment in the Royale Apartments complex at the corner of Colonial Drive and Mayflower Avenue in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. She lived there with her mother and older sister. That afternoon, her mother and sister left the apartment, asking Andrea to vacuum while they were gone. When they returned 2 hours later, the apartment was unlocked, but Andrea was nowhere to be found. Inside, her personal belongings, including her purse, clothes, and makeup, were undisturbed, and the vacuum cleaner stood upright in the living room as if Andrea had been interrupted mid-task. At first, investigators classified Andrea's disappearance as a potential runaway case or a possible non-family abduction. The lack of evidence or signs of forced entry made it difficult to determine what had happened. Initially, authorities leaned toward the theory that Andrea had run away, partly because she was reportedly unhappy with recent changes in her life. Andrea had to move to a new apartment and switch schools shortly before her disappearance, adjustments that were hard for her to accept. Additionally, Andrea had recently faced legal trouble for acting as a lookout while other children stole money from cars in a restaurant parking lot. For her involvement, she was sentenced to community service, but her family stated that she was not overly concerned about the punishment. Despite these circumstances, Andrea's family strongly believed she would not have run away voluntarily, leaving her home without contacting them for so many years. Andrea was a student at Pryor Middle School in 1990, where she performed well academically. She was described as a spiritual, outgoing young girl who enjoyed activities like camping, tennis, dancing, and trips to the beach. She had a vibrant personality and strong connections with her family and friends, making her disappearance all the more shocking. In the years since she went missing, Andrea has not made any contact with loved ones or friends, a fact that deepens the suspicion that she may have met with foul play. Over time, investigators began to explore other possibilities beyond the runaway theory. One avenue of inquiry involved two men, Mark Reeb and William Alex Wells III, who were suspected of kidnapping and murdering a woman in Santa Rosa, Florida, in 1989. Police have not found direct evidence linking Reeb or Wells to Andrea's disappearance, but the possibility has not been ruled out. Additionally, there have been unconfirmed rumors suggesting that Andrea may have remained in the Fort Walton Beach area for a short time after she vanished. However, investigators believe that if she had been living on the streets, her chances of survival would have been slim. Despite these theories, no solid leads have emerged to clarify Andrea's fate. The lack of closure has left Andrea's family in a state of perpetual grief and uncertainty. Her mother has since relocated to South Carolina, but continues to hold out hope for answers. The case has generated numerous rumors and speculation over the years, but none have led to concrete developments. More than 3 decades later, Andrea Durham is still missing, and her case remains unsolved. On January 10, 2009, Agie, a 6-year-old boy, was last seen in Immokalee, Florida, in the small community of Farm Workers Village, located on Gray Street. His mother, who worked at the time, left him at his grandmother's home in the village for the day. Agie was last seen at approximately 5:15 p.m. as he went outside to play with other children. That was the last confirmed sighting of him. After about half an hour, Agie's grandmother realized that he was missing. Concerned, she immediately began searching for him around the area. When 2 hours had passed without any sign of Agie, his grandmother called the police. Despite an extensive search of the village and surrounding area, no trace of Agie was ever found, leaving investigators and his family in complete uncertainty. There were no indications of foul play, and no evidence was uncovered to explain what happened to the young boy. At the time of his disappearance, Agie lived with his mother and stepfather. One of the theories investigators pursued was the possibility that Agie had been taken to Haiti, where his father and extended family lived. However, after thorough investigation, there was no evidence to suggest that Agie was taken there, nor was there any indication that his disappearance was linked to his family members. In fact, none of his relatives are considered suspects in his case. Agie's grandmother, who once lived in Farm Workers Village, no longer resides there. She now shares a home with Agie's mother and stepfather, who, in a bittersweet moment, named their daughter after Agie in honor of his memory. His disappearance has been a lasting trauma for the family, as they continue to hope for answers and closure. Authorities have suggested two possible scenarios in Agie's case. Either he wandered away on his own and became lost, or he was abducted by a non-relative. However, there is no evidence to support either theory definitively, and the case remains unsolved. Mary Dusk disappeared under troubling circumstances on April 28, 1982, from her home in Lighthouse Point, Florida, leaving behind a life marked by tension and domestic strife. At the time, she lived in the 3100 block of Northeast 31st Avenue and was embroiled in a bitter divorce from her husband, Joseph Dusk. Despite their separation, the two continued to live under the same roof, albeit in different wings of the house. Their home had become a symbol of the discord between them, with cowbells on their bedroom doors and an atmosphere described by police as like an armed camp. The day before she vanished, Mary visited her daughter and her family, appearing to be in good spirits. Later that evening, she went out with friends as part of her regular routine. At 1:45 a.m., she left to return home, seemingly unaware that this would be the last time anyone would see her alive. According to Joseph, the couple got into an argument in the living room upon her arrival. The confrontation escalated into a physical altercation, during which Joseph admitted to punching Mary in the face, causing her nose to bleed. He claimed that she left the house angrily, got into her yellow 1978 Lincoln Continental, and drove away into the night. Mary was never seen or heard from again. In May 1982, Mary's Lincoln Continental was discovered in the long-term parking lot at Miami International Airport. The contents of the car added to the mystery rather than clarifying it. Her purse, found in the trunk along with some old clothing, contained her checkbook and photos of her daughter and grandchildren, but lacked her wallet or any cash. Police examined both the vehicle and the couple's home, but found no bloodstains or other signs of violence. Despite Joseph's claims of a physical altercation, there was no forensic evidence to support his account. The Dusks' divorce proceedings at the time of Mary's disappearance were highly contentious. The couple had been married for 16 years, but the relationship had become toxic, with allegations of abuse on both sides. Mary had accused Joseph of beating her on multiple occasions, incidents that led to police intervention twice and a hospital visit in 1980 to treat injuries she claimed were inflicted by him. She had obtained a restraining order against him, but no charges were filed. Joseph, on the other hand, described Mary as very abusive and a combative presence in his life. Joseph's explanation for Mary's disappearance, that she left of her own accord, did little to convince her family and friends, who believed foul play was involved. Mary was close to her daughter and grandchildren, and it was out of character for her to abandon them without a word. Her disappearance left a void in her family's life, and the lack of answers compounded their grief. Joseph Dusk died in 1996, taking with him any undisclosed knowledge he might have had about Mary's fate. The question of whether her disappearance was connected to their volatile relationship or the bitter divorce remains unresolved. Neil Wayne Edelman and his son, Neil Allen Edelman, disappeared under mysterious circumstances during an ocean fishing trip off the coast of Naples, Florida, on October 17, 2003. Accompanied by 61-year-old Gary Lisk, the three men set out on Lisk's 24-foot hydrosports boat, aptly named What's Left. The group reportedly planned to visit the site of the California, a shipwreck 60 miles southwest of Marco Island, a popular fishing and diving destination. The boat, equipped with safety gear and operating in calm weather conditions, left shore without incident. At around 7 p.m., approximately 2 hours into their journey, Neil Allen attempted to call his girlfriend from a point 17 miles outside Gordon Pass. This phone call was the last known contact from anyone on the boat. The group was scheduled to return by 6 p.m. the following day, October 18th, but when they failed to return, Neil Wayne's wife reported them missing at 11 o'clock p.m. This triggered a search operation by the U.S. Coast Guard, which ultimately spanned over 129,000 square miles of the Gulf of Mexico. Amid the uncertainty, rumors circulated about their fate. One false report claimed they had landed in Cuba and been taken prisoner. However, by October 24th, after finding no trace of the boat or its occupants, the Coast Guard suspended the search. On November 3rd, nearly 3 weeks after the group's disappearance, the wreckage of the What's Left was discovered upside down on the Atlantic side of Florida, near a NASA launch pad in Cape Canaveral, 527 miles from the last known contact point. The boat appeared to have capsized and drifted upside down for at least 2 weeks, likely carried by the Gulf Stream. Photographs of the wrecked vessel showed heavy damage, but there was no immediate evidence of foul play. 3 days later, on November 6th, Lisk's body was discovered in the wreckage and identified. While an autopsy could not determine the exact cause of his death due to decomposition, authorities stated there was no sign of foul play. Lisk was a diabetic and had taken only 2 days' worth of insulin on the trip, which may have contributed to his death. However, Lisk's family raised concerns about the circumstances. Before leaving, Lisk had left an unusual note on his door stating he would be gone for a few days, behavior his family deemed uncharacteristic. They also questioned the handwriting on the note and found it suspicious that someone changed the locks on Lisk's home in his absence. Police claimed the locks were changed by Lisk's patients, as he was a drug counselor and psychotherapist, but his family disputed this explanation. While Lisk's remains were found, no trace of Neil Wayne or Neil Allen was ever discovered. The lack of evidence regarding their fates has left their disappearance a haunting mystery. In July 2005, the 2 men were declared legally dead, though their bodies remain missing. Neil Allen's mother sought a presumptive death certificate for her son to pursue wrongful death lawsuits against the estates of Neil Wayne and Lisk, alleging negligence in operating the boat. At the time of his disappearance, Neil Wayne worked as an addiction counselor and was a member of the Naples Seventh-day Adventist Church, along with his son. Both men were described as devoted to their faith and family, making their disappearance even harder for loved ones to bear. Despite decades of investigation, the full story of what happened that day on the Gulf of Mexico remains unknown. Sarah Ebersole vanished under mysterious circumstances on the night of March 2nd, 2023, in Reddick, Florida. The 29-year-old mother was last seen shortly after 10 p.m. that evening. Earlier, Sarah had texted her sister asking for a ride home from work, but her sister was unavailable. At 10:11 p.m., Sarah sent another message, jokingly mentioning she was getting into a random truck with some cowboys and hoped they took her on a ride. Surveillance footage from the Circle K store in the 17900 block of North Highway 441 confirmed Sarah getting into a black pickup truck with 2 men. She never returned home. Authorities determined that Sarah was dropped off at a subdivided residence in the 18,000 block of North U.S. Highway 441, where she socialized for several hours with James Robinson, the resident, and 2 other individuals, James Schaller and Tessesha McDermott, who lived in the other half of the property. The 3 witnesses later told police that Sarah left the house sometime between 3 o'clock and 5 a.m. in a newer model blue Hyundai sedan. The car was reportedly driven by a Hispanic man in his mid-30s with long dark hair and a thin build. While the witnesses speculated the vehicle might have been an Uber, investigators confirmed that Sarah had not booked an Uber ride that night, leaving the possibility that she accepted an off-the-books ride or a lift from someone else. A year after Sarah's disappearance, in March 2024, authorities announced that Tyrone D. Mormon was a person of interest in the case. They revealed evidence suggesting that Sarah had left with Mormon on the night she was last seen, even though Sarah's sister stated she didn't know him. Investigators secured a search warrant for Mormon's phone, but he initially lied to police, claiming he had broken and discarded it. He later turned the phone over, leading to his arrest in December 2023 for providing false information to law enforcement. Mormon, who is currently out on bond awaiting trial for the false information charge, denied any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. He insisted he was out of town at the time and claimed he had never met Sarah. However, witnesses contradicted his account, and data from his phone placed both him and Sarah together at a 24-hour convenience store in northwest Marion County during the early morning hours of March 3rd. Sarah's disappearance has devastated her family. She was the youngest of 7 children and was primarily raised by her maternal uncle and aunt in Sarasota, Florida. At the time of her disappearance, she was divorced, living with a roommate in the 19200 block of Northwest 60th Avenue, and working as an exotic dancer. She also had a young daughter who lived primarily with the child's father. Sarah's family described her as lively and deeply loved, making her sudden disappearance even more heartbreaking. Since that night, there has been no activity on Sarah's social media or financial accounts, and she took nothing with her when she vanished. Investigators have continued to pursue leads, but the case remains unsolved. Mormon's potential involvement and the circumstances of that night remain central to the investigation, but no charges have been filed against him in connection with Sarah's disappearance. Patrick Defrancesco and James Johnson vanished under mysterious circumstances on August 26, 1985, leaving behind a trail of rumors, unanswered questions, and devastated families. That day, the two men reportedly departed from an airstrip in Fort Pierce, Florida, on what was supposed to be an overnight trip. Patrick, who held a student pilot's license, was said to have accompanied James, a licensed pilot, on a flight to pick up a shipment of marijuana in the Bahamas or possibly St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. Neither man was ever seen or heard from again, and no wreckage from their plane was ever located, despite extensive searches and ongoing speculation about their fate. The disappearance was immediately fraught with intrigue. Patrick Defrancesco was known as a concrete worker, but allegedly supplemented his income by flying cocaine into St. Lucie County for Howard J. Crouch Jr., a local drug trafficker. Crouch, who had been paralyzed in a 1970 accident and used a wheelchair, was the owner of the plane the men were believed to have flown on their ill-fated trip. The airstrip they took off from was also tied to Crouch's drug operations. Rumors swirled about what might have happened. Some suggested the plane crashed, while others theorized foul play. A particularly tantalizing but unverified lead suggested that Patrick might have been found in a Jamaican jail sometime after his disappearance. However, this claim was never substantiated, and no concrete evidence ever emerged to support it. Over time, suspicion grew that neither man had ever made it out of Fort Pierce alive. Patrick's brother, who remains deeply committed to uncovering the truth, believes Patrick and James may have been murdered locally and their bodies buried nearby, possibly to conceal drug-related activity. Howard Crouch's connection to the case further deepened suspicions. While he was never charged in relation to the disappearances of Patrick and James, Crouch was later convicted of cocaine trafficking. In 1988, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years in prison for his role in arranging the delivery of 150 kilograms of cocaine to the same airstrip from which Patrick and James had disappeared 3 years earlier. Crouch's criminal activities and ties to the airstrip added weight to theories that Patrick and James may have been victims of a drug deal gone wrong. Patrick left behind a family who described him as a devoted father, brother, and son. He had 2 young daughters and 9 siblings, all of whom have suffered immensely from his unexplained absence. His family has consistently rejected the idea that he willingly abandoned them, pointing to his deep ties to his loved ones and his sense of responsibility. Maria Deli disappeared under troubling circumstances on May 17, 2010, leaving her family and investigators searching for answers ever since. That day, the 45-year-old mother of 5 was last seen leaving her cashier job at the Walmart on US 41, on Tamiami Trail East in Naples, Florida. Surveillance footage from the parking lot captured her walking outside after finishing her shift at 4:35 p.m., but the cameras did not reveal who, if anyone, picked her up or whether she entered a vehicle. Maria has never been heard from again. Earlier that morning, Maria's husband, Mathnal Darius, had dropped her off at work around 8:30 a.m., but claimed he did not know who gave her a ride home that afternoon. Her sudden disappearance has left her family devastated and full of unanswered questions. Despite her husband's claim of ignorance, Maria's family and friends described her as a dedicated mother and reliable employee who would never have abandoned her children, particularly without contacting anyone. Maria was the mother of 2 daughters and 2 living sons. A third son tragically died in an accident in 2002. While her loved ones acknowledged that Maria had left town twice before without informing her husband, they stressed that she always returned and that she would never have stayed away from her children for so long. At the time of her disappearance, Maria had worked for Walmart for 5 years and was known as a dependable employee. However, troubling details about her personal life emerged during the investigation. Maria and Mathnal, her husband of several years, lived together in an apartment off Green Boulevard. According to her family, the couple frequently argued, and there were allegations of physical abuse. Mathnal denied these claims, but they added a layer of complexity to the case. The couple had reportedly argued the weekend before Maria's disappearance, raising concerns that her vanishing could have been linked to domestic strife. Further deepening the mystery, Maria didn't have a driver's license and may not have had her diabetes medication when she went missing, raising concerns about her health and well-being. There has been no activity on her bank account since she vanished, and authorities found no indication that she had left the country. The lack of evidence has made it difficult to determine what happened to Maria after she was last seen walking out of the Walmart parking lot. In October 2015, years after Maria's disappearance, her husband Mathnal was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in an unrelated case. He was accused of shooting a man to death in the parking lot of an Orlando, Florida hotel. In 2019, Mathnal was convicted of first-degree murder and aggravated assault with a firearm in connection with the killing, and he is now serving a life sentence. While he has not been charged in connection with Maria's disappearance, he is considered a person of interest in the case. A photo of him is posted alongside summaries of Maria's case, underscoring investigators' suspicion that he may know more than he has revealed. Maria's disappearance remains classified as suspicious. Despite years of investigation, no significant leads have emerged, and her family continues to live with the pain of uncertainty. Her children, who have grown up without her, still hold out hope for answers and justice. Iva Edwards was last seen leaving her job at the Ranch House restaurant on West 49th Street in Hialeah, Florida, at 1:30 a.m. on October 26, 1974. A coworker reported that she left with her estranged husband, James T-Bone Edwards, and the pair walked across the street toward Big Daddy's Lounge. She was never heard from again. Iva had married James in 1949, and together they had twin boys and 3 daughters. James had a troubled past, having been dishonorably discharged from the Army after only 5 months of service and arrested numerous times, mostly for minor crimes, though he did serve 14 months for grand larceny. According to Iva's daughters, James had a violent temper, frequently tortured and killed the family's pets, and sexually abused the children. Despite the daughters' repeated pleas, Iva failed to intervene. The abuse and dysfunction took a toll on the family, with all of the children experiencing serious struggles as adults. One daughter ran away at 12 and became addicted to drugs. She and another sister lost custody of their children. One son was incarcerated for bank robberies, and the other died by suicide in his 20s. By 1974, Iva had finally left James, moving in with her oldest daughter, her daughter's infant son, and her 18-year-old daughter, Rena, in an apartment on West 68th Street. She began dating someone new and started working a late shift at the ranch house. On the evening of October 25th, just 2 days before what would have been their 25th wedding anniversary, James arrived at the ranch house and waited in his truck in the parking lot for several hours until Iva finished her shift. Rena, noticing him there, warned her mother, fearing he might harm them. Iva reassured her daughter, urging her to go home and saying, "Daddy's never going to hurt you again." That evening, Iva called Rena to let her know she would come home after work to have dinner, sounding calm and normal. However, Iva never returned to the apartment. James later claimed they had a drink together at Big Daddy's before he dropped her off at her apartment at 2:45 a.m., where he supposedly saw a group of hippie-type Puerto Rican men loitering near her car. He said Iva confronted them before walking toward her apartment door, after which he drove back to Fort Myers, Florida. Arriving at 5:45 a.m., Iva's children doubted she left willingly, as all her belongings were left behind, and after revealing James's history of abuse to the authorities, the case began to be treated as a possible homicide. Although James failed a polygraph test, investigators found no concrete evidence to charge him. The case was reopened in 1989, during which James denied any involvement, but his brother claimed that James had bragged about killing Iva a year after her disappearance, and James's young daughter and her husband reported that he had threatened to kill them as he had Iva. Despite this, no charges were brought against him due to insufficient evidence. Foul play is suspected in Iva's disappearance, but her case remains unsolved. Jamie Angstrom was last seen at 8:43 p.m. on February 20th, 1994, outside the Idle Spur Bar on Cleveland Street in Clearwater, Florida. At the time, authorities stopped her for walking in the middle of the street with an open container of alcohol. She vanished after that encounter and has never been heard from again. Angstrom was in regular contact with her family, calling them several times a month, but they have not heard from her since her disappearance. Her mother, who last saw her in January 1994, did not report her missing until December 1995, nearly 2 years after she was last seen. Angstrom had a troubled history and was well known in the Clearwater area as a prostitute. She lived near North Fort Harrison Avenue and had a criminal record that included arrests for prostitution, theft, and drug offenses. However, her criminal activity abruptly ceased after early 1994, coinciding with her disappearance. Her history extended beyond Florida, as she had also been arrested for prostitution in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. Investigators suspect her disappearance may be linked to a string of murders targeting local prostitutes during the same period. These cases raise suspicions of a serial killer operating in the area, but no definitive suspects have been identified. In addition to her ties to Clearwater, Angstrom had connections to West Springfield, Massachusetts, McKeesport, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She was the mother of identical twin sons and gave birth to a daughter in 1993, whom she placed for adoption. Despite her troubled lifestyle, Angstrom's sudden disappearance was uncharacteristic, and her family remains without answers. Her case remains unsolved, and foul play is suspected. Paul Eagan was last seen in Plantation, Florida, in the early morning hours of July 21, 1975, after completing his shift at the Florida Processing Company, located in the 6900 block of Northwest 69th Street. His best friend and co-worker, Norman Paul Rubottom, known by his middle name Paul, claimed they left work together and that Eagan made it home to his residence in the 5800 block of Cypress Road. Rubottom stated that Eagan's Jeep was found parked in the garage, with his wallet inside and his ignition keys placed on the bedroom dresser. However, police were unable to corroborate this account. Notably, Rubottom discovered the Jeep and keys himself and drove the vehicle around for several hours before eventually going to the police station to report Eagan missing. Eagan's brother, who shared the home with him, did not wake up during the night or notice anything unusual. Authorities explored the possibility that Eagan had fallen or been pushed into one of the rendering machines at the processing company. These machines were used to grind horse carcasses for products like soap, fertilizer, and cat food. While the equipment was inspected, no evidence of human remains was found. Investigators acknowledged that the machine's nature could have obliterated any evidence of foul play, complicating their inquiry. Additionally, Eagan had a valid passport, prompting speculation that he might have traveled to destinations such as Haiti, Jamaica, or South America. However, this theory yielded no leads. Authorities ruled out both suicide and drug involvement, as neither aligned with Eagan's character or circumstances at the time. His disappearance was considered highly uncharacteristic, and he was not experiencing any known issues in his personal life. Tragically, Rubottom himself died in August 1977 at the age of 25 under bizarre circumstances. He was inhaling cyclopropane, an anesthetic gas, at home when the accident occurred. This unusual development only deepened the mystery surrounding Eagan's disappearance. With no concrete evidence and no resolution, Eagan's case remains unsolved to this day, and foul play is suspected.